Today's lesson is on CS number 97, dependent and independent clauses. A clause is a group of words that contains both a subject and a predicate. Remember, the subject is the who or what in the sentence that does the action, and the predicate is what happens, and it always includes a verb. An independent clause, also known as a main clause, is a clause that could be a sentence all on its own. It wouldn't require anything else to be considered a complete thought or a complete sentence. A dependent or a subordinate clause, on the other hand, cannot be a sentence by itself. Now, this lesson might be a little bit confusing because sometimes we think that something should be a sentence, but it's actually not. It's actually a dependent clause. It needs another clause to attach itself to in order to be a complete sentence. If we look at the sentence, the river overflowed its banks after a torrential downpour fell for many hours. We have two clauses. So the river would be a subject, and the overflowed its banks would be a predicate. This is what happened, right? The what of the subject is the river, and what happened to the river? It overflowed its banks. After a torrential downpour fell for many hours. A torrential downpour is our second subject, and fell is a verb, right? Fell for many hours. This is our second predicate. Now, these are separated right here because you could say the river overflowed its banks, which means that this could be an independent clause. It's a sentence all by itself. The river overflowed its banks. After a torrential downpour fell for many hours is a dependent clause because it could not be a sentence on its own. You couldn't just say after torrential downpour fell for many hours. However, if you eliminated the word after, it might become independent again, right? A torrential downpour fell for many hours. That would be an independent clause, but the word after makes it dependent. It must be attached to another sentence in order to be a full sentence. It must be attached to another clause, another independent clause, in order to be a full sentence. To change a dependent clause to an independent clause, often we just need to take off the first word. Because she had to look after her brother is a dependent clause. That cannot be a sentence on its own. However, if we were to eliminate the word because and change it to she had to look after her brother, this is an independent clause. The same strategy could be used with while you were getting hot dogs. This is a dependent clause on its own. It is not a complete sentence, but if we take off while and capitalize you were getting hot dogs. That is now an independent clause. So if you're having issues with complete sentences, this might be one strategy to practice. For each of the sentences in this activity, you are going to underline the independent clause and put the dependent clause in parentheses or brackets. If we look at our sentence, Shane broke his arm when he got tackled playing football. We have two clauses. Each of these sentences will have an independent and a dependent clause. So Shane is our first person, he's our subject, and he broke his arm. So that's our first predicate. When he, there's our subject, got tackled, there's our predicate, playing football. So what part could we say on its own? Shane broke his arm. Okay, that's a sentence by itself. So if it can be a sentence by itself, we're going to underline it. Now the rest of it, when he got tackled playing football, is a dependent clause, so we'll put it in brackets. And you could see that if you covered the word when, you could say he got tackled playing football. That would be independent. So this word helps it to be a dependent clause. You do not need to put the subject and predicate in there. I just did that to help us see where the clauses are. All you need to worry about is underlining and in brackets. There'll be a Google form attached to this assignment, so I'll just ask you to write what's the dependent clause, what's the independent clause in this sentence, and feel free to reach out to me if you need some help.